Hey guys, it's Malik back again with Think Talk. I'm super excited for today's episode. It's Couch Conversation episode 4, and the focus for this episode will be economic systems and government systems. Without further ado, I'll jump right into it. The first topic is going to be about economic systems, and it's going to be about capitalism. Human existence today is done with capitalism. And if we're not open-minded to find better ways to go about it, it would lead to a devastating outcome. Hear me out. I'm not saying capitalism was completely bad or that it's completely bad. I think at the time that capitalism was even implemented or came to become the most common system in the world, it was absolutely needed. You see, at that time, innovation was needed to ensure that the scarce resources was better allocated and we can do more with less over time. And we've achieved a lot with that. I can't even fault that system in that regard. However, when we look at the world today, how much of human need do we not know how to provide? Exactly. In my perspective, I think capitalism has done a lot. And now we're moving to the other side of capitalism, let's say an unintended consequence of capitalism that we now need to figure out how to deal with. You see, capitalism had a tool to ensure that resource allocation will continue to be efficient, to ensure that this innovation will always be pointed in the directions that we need. Unfortunately, that tool is a little bit blunt for many, many reasons. That tool was government involvement. There is always a push for free markets, this and that. But when we do that, we see that money becomes the main focus of everything. So now you start to have inventions and innovations that does not really add much to the human existence, but just nudges us in a direction that I would say keeps us in the same circle, does not really have that much benefit. But as long as there's value exchange and there's a lot of money to be extracted from doing something like this is where a free market will lead us into. Because sometimes the collective can get it wrong as well, okay? Now, to control for this, we were supposed to have experts that would have a much bigger view and a much larger vision for what society should look like. This can be you, can be me, because we contribute into what these experts do as well. And then those experts will indicate to the government that it's time to influence the system somehow. But the government today as well only listens to money. So now the tool that was supposed to allow that resource allocation within capitalism is better is now a slave to capitalism itself. There are many, many examples of this. I believe that at the point that the world is in today, the best societies that I watch, they actually don't practice the pure capitalism that we see. They practice social capitalism. So what you see in the Nordic countries and what you see in some part of Western Europe. Yeah, I've seen a bunch of videos running around talking about how Europe is far behind and I would argue that it depends on the lens that you are viewing it from. When you view it from what we need as a society, I would argue that Europe is still quite far ahead from some of the largest economies that we have in the world today. This then leads me into the next point. When you want to know that a country or a society is still great, you would know it by the value that they put on human lives. And when you look at the country in the world today that labels itself as the greatest country in the world, the United States that is, you would see that they are far from being great. The US is far from being great. I want to make that clear. Now, one thing that I've realized in the past week is that as a Nigerian, there's a lot of desensitization that's happening simply because of our surroundings. So when I was living in Nigeria, you would have tragic incidents happen. People go off this earth or in many unnatural ways, like being clicked down or being hit by something. But something tragic happens and there's not a huge ruckus. People still go on with their lives even within the surroundings of those things happening. And it happens every day in different parts of the countries. And people just don't talk about it. It doesn't even make the news unless it's someone prominent or someone with a bit of visibility. Now, I wouldn't argue that that's an issue, and it tells me that Nigeria still has a long way to go. In the country that I currently live, which is Germany, when someone goes off the surface of the earth in an unnatural way, it for sure becomes big news. And the surroundings where those things happen immediately gets high focus from the authorities, whether it's with the investigation, whether it's with the media in how they want to make sure everyone knows that something like that has happened and it's such a tragic thing and it shouldn't happen, and so on and so forth. That's a working society. That's a country, from my perspective, that's actually great to an extent. When you look at what happens in the US, in the same week that the Charlie Kirk incident happened, which gained the rightful amount of attention, because if that kind of thing happens in any country that says it's great, that's the kind of attention that it should get. But in that same week, there was a school shooting that did not gain any attention at all. That tells you when a country is no longer great. The value it places on human life. The value on Charlie Kirk's life had monetary and political advantages, so it got all the attention. But the value it places on the lives that is not politically exposed, that is not rich, that's exactly how you know when a country is great. And when you look at countries that are still doing quite well today, a small incident, it's never small when someone goes off the face of the earth unnaturally, but an incident that is not happening to someone with exposure would still get massive attention nationwide, statewide, because that's what human lives mean to them. These countries that still have that kind of setup, they're usually the social capitalist countries. And the US, in the name of capitalism and the government system that it runs, it's lost all value for human lives unless there's an advantage to gain. That's why you have Charlie Kirk when he was alive, and even the vice president of the US always justifying people going off the face of the earth unnaturally for some rubbish goal that doesn't make any sense. Now, this shouldn't be the case. You see, the people, everyone within the society has a right to decide on what the society should be focused on. But we have democratic systems. And this brings me to my third point. For democratic countries, political discussions, economic discussions, social discussions are completely useless because it never focuses on what matters. When you think about democratic societies and you hear the news and you hear who people target or who people direct their attention to, you would know that it's completely useless. People direct attention to areas where they have zero circle of influence, as if we were in some sort of dictatorship. The democratic systems would usually have three arms of government. And these three arms of government play different roles. One thing that people don't want to admit today is that the arm of government, and I wonder why this is the case, the arm of government that gets the most attention is also the most protected arm of government, the executive arm. And this is the arm where the president, the ministers, and the governors and so on sit. They are the most protected because the only time that you really can influence what happens within that arm of government is every 4 years when an election happens, or every 6 years, depending on the country that you're in. So why do we focus on that? Why do they even make themselves that visible? Because we really can't control them, at least directly. So how are we supposed to do it? What should the political conversations and governmental conversations be focusing on? Yes, you want to know what the executive is doing because they sort of lead the government. But when you want to influence what they do, your best bet is to approach the legislative arm of government. The third arm is the judicial arm, and that's supposed to be some arm that follows the book. This is not always what happens, but it's supposed to follow the book. And that book that it follows, guess who can influence it again? The legislative arm of government. So who should be more popular in the political systems that we call democratic systems? Shouldn't it be the legislative arm? Because that's the part of democracy that makes it government by the people. Yes, elections are good, but it happens once in a while. It happens every 4 years, every 6 years, whatever it is that you have in your country. But who can you influence more regularly? You know that even the legislative arm of the government, they have this midterm election where you can always recall or vote someone else, because that's the influence that you have. So why are we not focusing on the legislative arm of the government? Every single attention. If you want to make influence on the federal level, focus on your federal representatives in the legislative arm. If you want to have influence on the state level, focus on your state representatives in the legislative arm. Those are the people that can help you to control or at least to direct the government in one direction or the other. Now there are inefficiencies in the systems that makes that very difficult. But part of those inefficiency comes from we not being on the same page. Yeah, there's power, there's this, but the biggest power still comes from the people. Because guess what? When the people get trampled upon for so long, and it's very clear that they are being trampled upon, there will be an uprising, and you will truly see that power lies with the people. But why don't we see eye to eye? Brings me to my fourth point. Government inefficiencies are rarely evaluated objectively. We never get government evaluation to be objective. In every other aspect of human existence, objective evaluation is usually quite possible. When you're in the private sector, you can look at the CEO of a company or the manager within a company. Of course, it's not always prim and proper and clean and perfect, but there is some level of objective evaluation possible. But when you think about the government, especially in a democratic society, it's so muddled up. This person is responsible for that thing. That person has that agenda, and that agenda suits that one, and this one. I think it gets super complicated, and the clear, simple, objective evaluation of what you want to achieve, regardless of how they do it, becomes very difficult. Now, it's not that the how is not necessary. When you look at the US, for example, you see people that want the US great in the Democrat Party, and you also see people that want the US great again as well in the Republican Party. Even independents, they all want the US great again. In a democracy, there'll always be the winners and the losers. This is fine. We all know it. So every 4 years, every 6 years, you get an opportunity again. But regardless of who gets elected in, regardless, you still have to demand what you expect from your government. And to do that, as I said, with the last point that I was making, you have to do it through your legislative. But how do you know what to demand? How do you know if they're performing? How do you know, even if they don't do it the way you want them to do it, that they're going in the direction that you want? Let's say housing. Let's say feeding. Let's just look at the hierarchy of need. Let's use the Maslow hierarchy of need. When you look at those things, how would you be able to tell objectively that you are improving in terms of those things? How do you know that the way your government is doing it is going in the direction that you want it to go? These are the questions. Evaluating government in an objective way. This is a massive gap in democratic systems. Not just democratic systems, all government. But democratic systems is the one that promises to involve the people. And if they promise to involve the people, then the evaluation has to be a thing. So let's start thinking. How can we set up objective evaluation systems for the different arms of government and for the different needs that you think your country would like or that your country need? I know I've rambled on about political systems, government systems, economic systems. It all links into each other. But I think somehow some of the questions that I've asked in this episode will continue to further the conversation in a direction where human existence only improves. Feel free to disagree with me. Feel free to share your thoughts if they are different. Just don't forget to like, subscribe, share with people that you think might be interested in this kind of conversation as well. And I look forward to your comments. Cheers.